Yes, here we are. That I want to introduce you into the theoretical frame of my thoughts about the Assertive Edition. Walk you through one possible example, which is hopefully a bit close to your research interests. A small project we did with students in Basel. Talk a bit about the semantic web and formal ontologies in general or in relation to this basic concept. Try to explain what I think Assertive Edition is not, where I see some boundaries, although that's related, and depending on school of thought, you would not take a strong limit, a strong boundary, but you would simply say, okay, one situation I'm talking about the Assertive Edition, and then another about the Proto Edition, but still they overlap. And I have some slides where I started to think about the School of Salamanca, which are ending usually with lots of question marks. So that's slides not I'm teaching you, but you can have to teach me theory. I had several discussions with people when I used this term, assertive. That sounds a bit, yeah, people are using it with a negative connotation, for example. Then I checked in standard dictionaries and so on. That's people having a small range of linguistic knowledge. And so the assertion, assertive, is something which can easily, it is usually defined in the scholarly literature I read as a declaration of something that is the case. Side story to this, I haven't called it assertive before I wrote, let's say, the last 2 weeks before I handed in the paper you read. But then I handed it to an American postdoc working with me, who did the proofreading and made readable English out of it. And I don't remember how I called it before. I've forgotten it immediately. He suggested, why not don't you call it assertive? And there was pressing time, so we decided, let's do it. It did not check on how if the term would be a good one or not. Now it's out there, and the nice thing is nobody else has used it, so it's connected with me, and there is no risk in misunderstandings because it's the only combination around. There are lots of other terms which could denote the same thing, but they, well, do not have no clear definition yet. So it's good that we have something we can define. I think what is important to keep in mind is that the term assertive assertion is nothing which is has the same status as factual truth, although it is a kind of declaration of factual truth. So it's easy to mix up, to say, okay, if I assert something, I think it's true. And we don't have to discuss about this assertion, we simply can agree on this, and then it's fine. But it's somebody asserting it, and that's important, because an assertive edition is not stating truth. It's stating what the editor thinks is true. And the second part in this definition is rather Wittgensteinianish a bit. There's something which is the case. So that is another way to avoid talking about facts and truth also. They are really close by. So it's something which is there. I assume it's there. So we could even insert this in the speech act theory context and still would say, okay, assertive assertion would be something, I believe this proposition is a true one. That's a type of statement. And that's the context. So we are talking on the one hand on truth and on real world, on propositions and stuff we can do logical reasoning on. And on the other hand, we are aware that is something somebody declares. It's not something which is proved by physical or whatever methods. This second part is somehow important for the concept of edition, because it is closely related to an idea editors sometimes don't like, but when they start to think about, they usually agree that an edition is not creating facts, not creating truth. It's not recording what is there, but is recording what the editor think is there and how the editors want to express what is there. So starting by transcription, you can have lots of options how you can transcribe something. You made your decisions and you have good reasons for this, and so this is already your interpretation. All the encoding in the TI world is there's lots of options you could do, saying, okay, how to encode a name. My example I love much more than this free range of decisions is a description of formal features metadata. And the seal is, for me, a good example because there are lots of established terms which describe a condition of a non-complete seal. Broken color, stuff by which it was made. And in particular, color is a nice example because color has strong meaning, but visually, deciding which color it is, you would say, okay, it's a brownish red or a reddish brown or something, but you would simply say red seal because everybody knows when you see enough red, then it's this category of red seals, and you want to assign this to this category. And the world of annotation is definitely a wide range of possible interpretations. What do you think is important to annotate, and how do you do your annotation? How you describe your annotation, in which kind of wording or not wording, how fixed is the style? And so the classical philologists have a rather established style, while editors from historical documents in the 16th, 17th century are much more wide. If you think in the edition of Hitler's Mein Kampf recently, then it becomes really broad. They are creating kind of framing context much more dominant than the text itself. So they tell their story on this text, and the text is only a small part, etc., etc. So that's everything. All of this is interpretation. The assertive edition is interpretation as well. Next context, which helps me to frame how I came to the idea of the assertive edition and why I think it's worth it, is Patrick Stahler's text wheel. The text wheel is his visualization, his approach of making visible and understandable that when you do an edition, you have make lots of decisions which push your edition into directions, which reflect on the pluralistic ideas you can have about the text. And in this text wheel, he has usually the 6 points where you can start almost everywhere. And I will start here on the pointer style. No, I'm drawing everything. Anyway, on the upper right side, the idea of an edition, which is mostly this very traditional philologic approach to say, okay, there is a work by Cicero, by whoever, and there was this one work, this idea about how it should look like, and now I'm trying to reconstruct this. And this work is a rather vague, abstract concept, and then the philologists struggle and end up in the linguistic perspective, say, okay, that's the specific words I find in manuscripts, and I compare all these manuscripts, and when I compare, then I decide which words are the good ones, and there are neglectable variants because they don't change the sense, and there are not neglectable important variants which change the sense. So then we are oscillating between the work and the linguistic part, but well, they are considered in how Cicero would have talked about his text or how he wrote his text. He dictated them, in fact, of course. While people working with the originals And when I look at your 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 editions, I see that you have lots of this attraction of the perspective on the lower point of view. Say, okay, there's a specific way how you encode this linguistic basic structure. You can use abbreviations. You can use paragraphs. You can use italics and stuff like this. And so you are more on the character, on the graph, on the level. So you're pointing it down from the words and the text and their meaning to something which has a specific look. And then you end up, okay, I'm not looking at the text anymore. I'm looking at the document. I'm interested where on the page the text is sitting. If there is a marker on the side, if somebody made a handwritten note on this, okay, then you have this physical document. And when you're in the physical document, you're interested in which library owned this book, for example. Then you end up very fast in the next perspective, saying, okay, I'm looking at the document and I'm interested in how it looks like. So which titles, are there any titles at all? Do they imitate the layout of a former edition of the same text, or don't they care about this? And medieval manuscripts using rubrics, red stuff to highlight things, and then the print comes and they introduce, because color is hard, they introduce special characters, all this kind of bold style stuff, etc., etc., etc. I deliberately left out the upper column because this upper thing is not good connected to the visual. It's very much strong connected to the word perspective. It's the idea that I read a text because I want to know what's in the text. I want to understand the text. I want to have an idea how people thought. So in the end, I even don't care about the words. I might not even care about the textual structure if the text expresses the same thought. I start to connect texts which by linguistic features look completely different, etc., etc. As having studied medieval studies and historical experience sciences, I'm very well connected to this idea and the idea of medieval charters, where people say, okay, the core historical and legal content is something which is interesting, and the words are only transporting this thing. So who did what to whom, and what kind of legal action was this? Okay, that's the assertive part in editing. One could visualize this in a specific, in a slightly different way, where you say, okay, if we are as editors, we have the physical objects or the physical objects, which constitute somehow the experienceable representation of the text, and can approach this now by establish different methods, by only summarizing the content, by doing a diplomatic transcription, so being detailed on how it looks like, or by doing this kind of critical edition where you've built an established text and have a kind of abstract notion of the text. So you could consider that an editorial representation has an approach towards the text more on the visual side, on the image side, and coming closer to this, the diplomatic transcription is an intermediate. And you could consider the text as the words, how are the linguistic structure, or you could consider the text as something which is transporting information. And all of this is, of course, connected. So that's theoretical framework, that this content part, this Patrick 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 text as content, I have called them, usually forgetting it, text as semantics in this case. Sometimes these labels change anyway. As semantics, that this should be part of an edition and is part of an edition and was part of an edition since already the printing age. Much differently represented than I think currently the digital methods could do. I talked about charters diplomatic editions in the sense of medieval documents. Here, one example of a work where I was very distantly involved. The editions of the charts of Emperor Frederick II. And you have here in the beginning this short description of the content. And many historians just flip through and use just this information and don't care about the very text very often. Another example is the text of the editions of the Imperial Diet of the Reichstag, which have also the tradition to have a kind of abbreviated summary, and not only an abbreviated summary, because they even decided to represent parts of the text. They don't think the explicit wording is important enough as in modern summary, as an abbreviated paraphrase of the text. So there is a document where they simply don't edit the words, but they edit the content. The example from which I came when my earliest idea, long before I called it Assertive Edition, is this one. Andreas said only that I'm in accounting. I have a bit of history in accounting, not accounting, modern accounting, but in my research biography. Where an archivist, an historian, Rudolf Knipping, and the late 19th century decided that it's not worth to transcribe a full the full text of an account book, a medieval, but it's better to sort this in this kind of table style, because nobody would be interested in the very wording. They would only be curious about the numbers. Again, it's a kind of edition which is only concerned with content. And last example, again from the 13th century, document I used rather extensively, the Chronica Riccardi di Santo Germano, early 13th century, Frederick II, and the Scriptores Italicarum Scriptores had the tradition, not only in this case, that they added on the right side, you see these marginal notes, maybe nobody can read them, maybe the people online can read them, maybe, where they added core information about the historical facts represented there. So that's kind of summary. Okay, we're talking now about the colloquium apud vemulas. That's the content, so kind of heading to the section, but added by the editor. Helping the user to find the content, the historical story, core information more easily. On this rather abstract approach, next slide would be the first slide where you could interrupt me, where I have lots of question marks, 3 already, thinking a bit where this kind of content side comes up. For example, content comes up in my interpretation, my experience with medieval commentary, where the authors start to think in terms of pieces of legal thought of their text. So they do an argument by referencing the abstract identifier, the paragraph, the titulus, the whatever, and not discussing in words. So they start to move away from, I have a linguistic representation of my legal fact, towards something where they think that's a topic, a concept, a notion I want to refer here. Of course, it's also simply a pointer and not only. The other argument where I would start to think in this terms of content-wise text understanding would be that law studies work with established terminology. They have lots of terminology which is implicit in the community and not discussed anymore. and where they share lots of understanding about this. And if you start with thinking in terms of this terminology, you are very close in thinking in terms of abstract concepts, and you're looking only for the abstract concept, even if the wording is different. I know that legal studies have a bit of problem, this distinction between wording and content, but this is where I would start to think about this. Okay. Question marks. Nobody wanting to interrupt me? And please remember the question marks and give me answers to this. Discuss this with me. Let's go to an example. This example is an 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 𝗛𝗶. So 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹. I should have looked it up in English. There is no translation into English. I hope several of you will have heard about it anyway, as legal historians. This medieval and early modern approach that you can legal action includes also a personal obligation in accepting the legal action. The 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹, so in this 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 𝗛𝗶, the city of Basel recorded people declaring their acceptance to a legal decision, a criminal legal decision, and not keeping this as offense to the city, and by this maybe getting into military struggle or whatever. So it's a record from the one side of criminal history, because it records case decisions on criminal offenses. And on the other hand, formally, it's a documentation for the city to deal with people they want to, not to continue legal or non-legal fights. This 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 𝗛𝗶 was edited in a seminar in Basel, on the seminar on early modern history. So lots of students involved, and they used, we gave them an TI encoding to this pattern and built the website to this. And in this website, here it is, no. You have the text. Be there somehow. There it is. Sorry, now I'm deleting everything by clicking around. I hope. Not the best version, but so it should work. We have here still. Let's see. You have on the right side here, on the left side, the text, even transcribed by line. And on the right side, you have this description of the content. So we have categories for the offender, of the victim. We have other people's mentioned here. We have the type of crime. We have the punishment decided. We have some places, and we have additional keywords. So the core of this legal interaction is recorded. We have the date, by the way. It's a crucial thing for us. Okay. So this combines the transcription, and that's with this content-wise, this description. And by this combination, it's for me a prototype for an assertive edition. Practically, it was done by NTI encoding, in which people sitting at the screen at home and people sitting in the front might see that here are some annotations which describe these categories, relate to these categories. And there is an additional representation, not only the TI, but also a representation of the record in RDF, in the database. In this database, you find many of the things you have seen in this annotation. So there is the offender, there are co-offenders here, there is the victim, there are keywords around something, and they are pointing RDF style to some other entries which give text on them, give content on them, so the date is discussed somewhere else, etc., etc. So by this, we have the database, we have the assertions, the content, which we can then use database style. And the database style here is not completely thought through. Raw visualizations. Christopher Pauline did several years before he became professional in visualizations, but it's still informative. It's the network's not the most the best metaphor, but it still creates clusters, visual clusters. And the red dots are male offenders, and the yellow dots are female offenders, and the green stuff is the type of punishment, and the blue stuff is the type of crime. And you see that they split a bit. So there are crimes done by female, more often by females. More often is very risky. You see that the number of female crimes for female offenders is much closer and smaller than of male. So there is a statistical imbalance in this. But still, there are typical or less typical, or at least things which are only connected to male stuff. I don't recall them now in detail because we never did a study on this. But there's a bit. Well, there would be, I think, fighting amongst the offenders is usually on the male side. That does not involve females. While drunkenness and stuff usually involves both sides, and people, I think one of the male crimes is throwing out people of the house. So it's kind of violence at home style, which is usually associated with male, etc., etc. Okay, this is possible. This is done through query. I selected the check if I find it immediately. Where is it? I found it. Anyway, the sparkle is a bit. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, here it is. Here we had, sorry. One too far. We used here where keyword poverty was used. So this is a selection of the data set where the keyword poverty was involved in this graph, this subset. Okay, that's a possibility you can do. And if you browse through the website, you will see that's rather easy to do, just simply clicking through. But you could start to think in your own terms of research and not using this one. So you could now on this RDF apply your own RDF, your own Sparkle, your own query, starting with different approaches to this, etc. And the other research possibility coming out of this is you could start to reuse this data rather easily in all other RDF data sets if you have any kind of overlap in your vocabulary. That's why I'm citing here the 𝗿𝗏 taxonomy. So you could think in terms, okay, let's align these crimes and the punishments with the matters of the police ordinances, and see how police ordinance organized things, which then ended up in 𝗿𝗏𝗴. or in different data sets. This is not done. The project was 1 semester seminar. Students, 15 students, I think, were in this course. So not many. So the ontology of this representation is rather, well, homemade and not really thought through. Is not very rich, but still, I did not translate the German term. Sorry. So the victim. So this would be is what we needed, what we used there. Getting back to this graph you have seen, this example should show a bit what the technologies would be to realize this Assertive Edition. The technologies would be on this visual side. You can do scans, and that's well established. You have many scans, and you have 𝗟𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗹 and all this stuff where it's easy to get to images. On the level of the transcription, you have the TI, which allows you documenting lots of features of transcription, abbreviations, whatever, etc. Linguistic features and paleographic features. And on the level of the content, the assertions, you have a semantic web ontology. In our case, an application ontology not shared, but you could combine this or use shared ones, and you could certainly use all the linked open data style URIs to connect your stuff, your data with other data sets. So we have stuff like 𝗟𝗶𝗴𝗶, we have stuff like XML-TI, and you have stuff like RDF, which would be, from my current point of view, the technologies to apply. And you can then start to connect all of this and end up in another ontology, which is not of our concern here. All of them pointing to the document as an abstract URI, which I think would be a good idea, that all different interpretation of the same document elsewhere could then start to merge. Okay, this was this example. Getting back to something where you get an impression of this and can think about this and consider if you want to ask something before I move to the next section. Discussing why I think the RDF approach and the semantic web is a good one on this. One thing is that the basic metaphor on which the data model is built is really close to an easy expression of knowledge. This triple style subject, predicate, object metaphor, helping people say, okay, if you can build a simple sentence, then you have already done a basic step towards RDF. And if you can think in your research in simple sentences, that's hard, I know, then yeah, it's not that complicated to get into queries, to understand the data model and deal with it. So this statement style and this statement metaphor is a good thing to very close to scholarship. The other part is where I am, well, introducing things. Because when you can talk about reality in simple statements, you can already do meta talk, like talking about argumentation, uncertainty, etc., in these simple sentences. So stating this fact is probable uncertainty or less probable. And there are proposals to model this, to describe this, to create vocabularies. The two links I put here are recent results of the DH conference, where colleagues in Vienna gave a paper on how to be non-assertive in the Assertive Edition. And they proposed using 𝗟𝗶𝗴𝗹 to declare probability of statements of extracted facts and their addition. when you think in terms of the text encoding initiative, and many people are, well, editors, digital editors, or editors confronted with digital methods, I'm accustomed with the TI, and to many people, it's rather, well, it's a deep dive, but it's not a long dive or a hard dive, because the TI has lots of features which are make it easy for scholars, editors, in particular editors to understand, because they know about the problems from which the TI built the encoding. So TI would be a competitor to the semantic web in general, and XML would be. I would currently say, as you have seen in this graph where I said, okay, there's the image, there's the text as linguistic and polygraphic feature, and there's the content. On all these textual linguistic features, the TI is rather good, because it considers, starts from the text as a sequence of words, and has lots of proposals, lots of annotations are close to this approach and help us to do this. There are data structures in the TI, which, and there becomes usually the discussion with TI people comes when I come with my RDF wishes. Because they say, what do you care about RDF? I can describe a person very easily and nicely with a person tag, and I have lots of elements I can put there, etc. So there are data structures. There are data structures which are conceptually rather underdefined and astonishingly hard to change, hard to extend into, well, your research domain. So if you don't align with the research domain TI defines, you start to invent elements or to invent type or analytic text. So build all this meta annotation, and then you're already leaving the TI in reality. The XML is a nice thing if you deal, if you accept the ordered hierarchy of content objects approach to text. It's not that nice if you feel like it's not enough. In particular, if you can look at the data structures, you will realize that it has an inherent meta concept, which is really, really underdefined or really, really broad, because nesting one element in the other does not have any meaning. And there are two basic approaches already, which are rather different in understanding and interpreting the XML encoding. You could either say, okay, my person tag defines what the sub-elements mean, so gives context, dominates them. Or you could say, I have a chapter in which there are lots of paragraphs, containment. So they contain each one on each other. Completely different approaches. Same style of meta model, same style of annotation. And so by this, you're losing track on what you really, what your statement is, what your scholarly argument is. And nice thing about the TI is there are lots of scholars around, and it's built on scholarship of the last 40 years and of humanities, long-standing scholarship. So even if it's probably Anglo-Saxon biased or less, continuously, they recently introduced the concept with labels drawn from Japanese textual scholarship, the Ruby model. Anyway, there's a large scholarly agreement on what is there and how to do that, etc. So it's certainly nice if you work on the text, and it has lots of features to describe the text linguistically and polygraphically. If you are in this data structures world, it's not that nice, I would say. Semantic Web has the advantages to be highly structured. There's a strict, the statement style is a strict rule, and can deduce lots of logical consequences of this. It can program it really rather easily, and the graph model is rather is very rich in expressiveness and open to extensions. You can introduce formal semantics, can declare much more logics about your vocabulary than you do in the TI. And there are, in fact, lots of vocabularies around where communities, even for the humanities community, declare these semantics and make them explicit. So I would say if you come into this knowledge representation and data reuse world, and not on the text representation, then RDF is still the better choice. Curious what you think about this. Semantic Web, 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 usually says if somebody claims, oh, it's already old and forget it, he says, oh, Semantic Web is around for 20 years. And why there's no reason to argue why it won't be around for the next 20 years, because the community is still there, still working on it, even if it never took up as Tim Berners-Lee might have imagined it when he proposed it in the beginning of this century. I think it has lots of advantages and has established itself as a data exchange format for symbolic knowledge representation. It is better than all other data descriptions when it comes to sharing of data models, because it's much more explicit in its semantics than all labeled property graph style, etc. And it has currently competitors in the graph world from the labeled property graph and in the technological world from JSON. Both of these still know that Semantic Web is the 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 recommendation. And so by this, they try to build the plugins and combine all of this. And one of the most promising technological development by a doctoral thesis at TU Graz invented is JSON linked data, which combines the technological advantages of the use of JSON data style with the ideas of the Semantic Web. So I have a quite optimistic perspective on Semantic Web. Problem of reification and provenance is dealt with length graph and the establishing RDF star style and yeah, how you say this kind of data model. Okay, these possibilities, I already showed a bit of them in my example. First thing I talked about, the formal logics. I would like to be a bit more specific on and demonstrate this slightly. On this example of the web ontology language, in which you can do lots of logical things, which are nice to have, which help to research data with this, and which help to start to use things like inference, so deducing from statements. This example is a legal criminal history example I invented. I did not invent it, I prepared it for today. So there is murder and manslaughter, for example, two different legal concepts, different types of crimes, and there are different types of crimes. Oh, sorry. The sense of that a judge has to decide if something is a manslaughter or murder, because it cannot be both. This is something you can express in the web ontology language explicitly. You can describe them in more detail. Here you see murder is a crime which happens to a human where he dies, is murdered, and there's a purpose in this activity, which would be the difference to the manslaughter. And it's an illegal activity I declared here, down here. I just introduced already the concept of the application ontology on this 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 where I said, okay, that's a rather project specific, but something where RDF is explicitly declaring that's a possibility, do this, and then moving into shared ontologies where people start to discuss this and come up with these shared ontologies, which might end up in upper level ontologies, which are then high ranking, covering lots of domains. And the list down there is not completely on the correct level here, because there should be and it's incomplete. And this should move somewhere up here. Police ordinance matters, you have seen that's a ontology, and an ontology created by philosophers, semi-automatically extracted from philosophical papers. And there are many thinkers of the School of Salamanca are in this ontology because people write about them. And down here should be the long list of proposals for legal ontologies. They are, well, I think there are 8 or 10 proposals, which, well, are not really agreed on. And there's a recent paper discussing this. Why? Because the, the work towards a shared ontology is not that, has not come far enough. So not enough legal people, legal authorities, whoever, joined force and tried to build their common ontology. Okay, coming back to the Assertive Edition. That was the discourse on why I like Semantic Web. These ontologies have a strong role in the idea of the Assertive Edition because they create context to the edition. Which means, demnach zwischen Riechen und Basel 𝗵𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗁 den Metzger umbracht, darum darum für einen 𝗚𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗀𝗁 Totschläger verruft worden. So Simon Fowler killed 𝗵𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗀𝗁 and is was judged on manslaughter. And this sentence here is 16th century Alemannic German, whatever. So not really easy to be compared to whatever kind of 16th century legal thinking elsewhere. But there are clear concepts in it. And I have to declare these concepts. And if I start to declare these concepts explicitly, I'm adding knowledge, and I'm adding knowledge by contextualizing. So my ontology, saying my crime ontology, where I had distinguished murder and manslaughter, I could now start to declare that these two words, killing and doing manslaughter, that are close by, but have a significant consequence. A significant consequence, for example, linking it to law, contemporary law, and the Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, I know is not the most applied legal concept, but it's at least gives some indications, for example, and it indicates that manslaughter and murder is punished by death, by different type of death. Context. Introduced through an ontology, which would link the Constitutio Carolina or any kind of laws related to criminal justice with this very text, which makes it interesting because it's in 𝗚𝗲𝗴𝗹. The person has not been killed. There were no capital punishment. He was expelled only from Basel. And then you get this context, which when continue reading the text might start to connect you, okay, my context helps me to see that there's a problem, there's something I should study deeper, and realize here, okay, he returned to Basel. He was expelled, he left Basel, but returned to Basel several times, together with the Duke of Württemberg and with the Duke of 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹, and finally even with the Emperor. So he probably was part of the court and had some political context, which made the decision that this formal consequence of his crime was not executed. Okay. Ontologies, Semantic Web is not only a good formal description of content, but also it gives the possibility to contextualize content. Assertive Edition, GI transcription, lots of nice RDF. Now let's talk a bit about what is not. First thing, I gave a talk in 2 weeks ago in Graz and wrote a paper, was published last year, on a concept called proto-edition. Dominik Sitzmann coined the term in a talk I heard. He's never written about it as far as I know, calling something artificial edition. 𝗵𝗵 𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗹 philosopher, well, somehow inspired me of the idea of the Assertive Edition in his talk in 2014, I think it was, in the DH conference in Passau, and wrote the paper on concept of nano publication. And there are people talking about semantic editions or semantic web editions, which could be the same, because I promoted the semantic web as the tool for the Assertive Edition. These, we can distinguish them because the proto edition is something which is on the text wheel on the upper left corner, so there is no transcription. There is only image plus content. And my idea, and I stole the idea partially by people, Marek Swan, I realized only this year that he had the idea already in 2005, not calling it proto edition, after I had long published this idea of proto edition elsewhere. Anyway, proto edition would be something like this, where you have records, the minutes of the council of Bozen, in this case, city council of Bozen, and you have structured descriptions of the content. So a database combined with images. There are several other examples. I will skip through. The artificial edition is different from the idea of my assertive edition, that it can end up in some database. So content could be described in particular by an identity recognition, information extraction methods, but as long as it's based only on artificial intelligence, on automatic extraction methods, you might even consider it not calling it an edition, because you would say, where's the editor in this? It's just pushing things through a machine and seeing what comes out and hoping that it's fine. By this, it's an artificial edition, like artificial intelligence. A brief comment on this: HDR is rather good. It's not good enough, well, no editor would accept 95%, but still it's good enough that you can do lots of things with it. Identity recognition is a bit behind by lots of reasons. One is a reason that there are lots of named entities wording, so linguistic features the standard modern named entity recognition has no clue of. So having Wolfgang count off, you have the count of something, and Wolfgang and the standard NER would separate the count, the name of the count and the place, while it's definitely somehow combined. Orthography is a problem. Astonishingly, lots of information for NER is dependent on orthography. Okay, the nano publication Stefan Hersbruggen introduced is the idea coming from the national sciences, where they said, if we do experiments, if we create data sets, and there are lots of single lines declaring this is a gene, this is something, which is not associated to people who declared this, but which is part of a large paper where there's some research data on it. So the people on the nano publication world suggested that we should assign credit the people for this single observation, which is easily done in the RDF world with the statement style. Lots of things to be considered on this, what kind of crediting should be considered then. But still, it's not the core of the Assertive Edition, because as in the Assertive Edition, we do these kind of statements, or I suggest to do. And we can assign this, but the concern is not that much who did this, but the concern is that doing it at all. So assigning and crediting it in detail is a good idea, but still, if it's not done, it's not there. So that's separating the Assertive Edition from other types, which could be similar. Now come the slides with lots of question marks, but I talked an hour and I had already other question marks. I would suggest that we wait a bit with these slides and we start with your questions and comments on the concept of the Assertive Edition. And maybe you will already come up with your own ideas on how to answer this. So please, I am now stopping to talk, please.